Hello, and welcome to another Steer Your Career podcast. Today, I'm really excited to have not just a career coach here, but I would say a career expert. I've been following Keith Anderson and his insights and wisdom on LinkedIn for a while now. I reached out to Keith, and like I meet all my friends nowadays, we struck up a conversation on LinkedIn, had a conversation, and we have a lot in common. Like me, Keith comes from the big tech world. He'll talk a little bit about his background, and he's now transitioned into the career coaching space where he's a founder at Career Alchemy. And he'll talk a little bit about that. But he's going to do a lot better job of introducing himself and his background. So I'll hand it off to you, Keith. Tell the Steer Your Career audience a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Hi, everyone. My name is Keith, and I'm really happy to be on here with you, Alan, and excited to talk with you and your audience. Yeah, a little bit about me. Going to go a little far back. I was someone who always wanted to be a teacher growing up. I did that, and I realized that it wasn't for me at a certain point in my career. From there, I transitioned into tech, where I worked at large tech companies, as Alan was saying, Google, Uber, Facebook, or now Meta, DoorDash. And for me, I moved into the designer space within those companies and then went up the career ladder to VP of learning at a startup called Calibrate. And now, as of around this time last year, I've fully got into moving into career coaching and career guidance, as this is a passion that I've had for a long time. And now it's at a point where it has been really become my baby, essentially. So yeah, last year around this time, I decided to go full in and doing some great things, working with amazing people, and I couldn't be happier. Yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Awesome. And you breezed over that really quickly. You're like, yeah, I started off life as a teacher, then I transitioned into tech. It's not that easy.
No.
So tell us, how did you make that change, Keith? And how do you make that change? And what sort of advice and guidance do you have for others out there that are looking to pivot industries?
Yeah, for sure. And Alan, just as you said, it was a lot of different components that led up into making this career transition for me in about 1.5 to 2 years. As I said, I had wanted to be a teacher early on. I went into doing that after I graduated with a degree in linguistics from University of Hawaii. And I liked it for about a year, but then I loved teaching, but I didn't like the administration and like the state standards. And honestly, some of the parents too made it very difficult.
I'm a parent of kids. I know we're
Okay. And it wasn't, I was teaching high school and it wasn't really a great fit at that point. So I listened to the advice from my friends and family, like one does. And they were suggesting that I get a master's degree in education, because maybe if I'm teaching higher ed or something else, it'll be different. So I did that. And then I taught composition to undergrads and grads at a few universities in the Bay Area. And the student population, it was great, but the same issues, not with parents, of course, but with the administration and being an adjunct faculty member. I was earning less than $30,000 a year doing that, and I didn't have any job stability. And I also had just a breaking point, essentially. I had a bad pneumonia in 2014, and I was in the hospital. I called the HR of the school and I said, hey, I can't come in. And basically, Alan, they gaslit me. They were saying, they were like,
wow.
oh, sorry to hear this, but your students need you. They need someone to proctor their final exam. They need someone to grade it. When will you be able to get in? And I just realized in that moment, that was like the icing on the cake, that like, this isn't for me anymore. There's no growth. This is not where I want to be moving. How I landed into tech is I first went in and I got clear about myself, who my identity was outside of teaching, because I'd identified like Keith equals teacher as my professional identity. And I was lost, right?
Mhm.
So I went in, did some exploration work to really understand what my true values were and what my passions were too, because I was working all the time and didn't really know. Fast forward to about 8 months later, I was attending networking events and meeting interesting people. And one person that I met was a recruiter for Google at the time. And we were just having an everyday conversation for about 30 minutes to an hour about our lives, her children, all of that. It came up at the end of the conversation that I'm moving I'm looking to move into a different career path. And I told her in web development for learning teams, right? She said, "Oh my God, I just opened a position in that realm." So it seemed like a natural fit. And throughout that experience of talking with her more about the role, and then also obviously interviewing with the team and doing a few other things to show how I'm not just someone who's transitioning, but I'm someone who has the skills, expertise, and really the critical thinking that they need on the team, that I was hired for the role. That's essentially the path that I took to move into tech. And last thing, I remember in 2006 and 2007, I always looked at working at Google with amazement. I remember seeing videos on YouTube before it was owned by Google of like how there's like swimming pools and there's all these cafeterias and ping pong tables. And I was mesmerized like that. I was like, wow, this is like an all-inclusive resort. And I'd always kind of dreamed of that. And then it finally kind of came true like 10 years later. But it's just funny how the world works and how that worked out. Yeah.
Yeah. The relationship with building this like you met at a networking event, it sounds like, with somebody, and they put your name in the mix for a role. But Google, that gets your resume seen, but you still had to go through the typical interviews, I'm assuming.
Oh, 100%. So this was a recruiter who I met at the event. So that was also great too. And she was hiring for that specific role, but recruiters are there to guide and give experience, but they're more on the technical end to make sure that folks have the requirements that they need for that role. So even though she recommended me to the hiring manager and they were interested in me, obviously, by no means was I a complete shoo-in or anything like that. Especially at Google, they hire very few people for the amount of applications they get. Yeah. So it was special, and there was some serendipity that came into that, but really there is like a structured approach that I didn't realize at the time, but it was something that I was doing that kind of brought me to make this big jump from being an adjunct faculty member to working at one of the top tech companies at the time. Yeah.
And Google, as I know, has a very unique way of hiring people. They focus on role-related knowledge, general cognitive ability, Googliness, and leadership, and they have a very structured interview process. Not only did you pass that, but you also got into Uber, you also got into Meta, you also got into DoorDash, Calibrate as a startup. Talk a little bit about all these very attractive companies and their interview process. How would you compare and contrast some of those processes that you went through?
Yeah, so in big companies and big tech in particular, they have a pretty structured approach to the interview process, right? And relatively pretty structured questions and pieces there. So really, besides the typical areas of the interview where there's one interview that focuses on interpersonal skills, another one that focuses on technical skills and what have you, what I feel had been the best approach to all these conversations is building like a warmer connection with someone during that call, even just small, short things at the beginning that really started to put down defense, for lack of a better way of saying it. Because being an unknown person, and just like everyone else they're interviewing, I became someone who they started to have a connection with. And then there's some other things I did so that I wasn't actually going in as like a cold applicant. So the process, for me, it's similar to anyone else. That being said, like I did a lot of extra things on the back end to make sure that I am with the people that I'm talking to. Because at the end of the day, Alan, when you apply online and you're going through the ATS system, you're just a resume. You're not a person. You need to be proactive and become the person for the people on the hiring panel, the recruiter, and other people who might be influential in the company.
And you say you did these extra things on the back end. What are some of those extra things on the back end that you've done before that you advise with your clients, or suggestions on how to tip the scale in your favor versus all these other competitors in the space?
Yeah, 100%. So I would say like some of the things that you hear career coaches say is you want to build your network, you want to reach out to people, things like that. But it's the quality of those, not just the quantity. So some things that I did is I was very active on LinkedIn, building a connection with people, setting up informational interviews. But during the informational interviews, I was very strategic and thoughtful with my purpose and their purpose and what we're going to be using the time for. I think coming in those meetings, informal, conversational, but still a bit of structure, I think that really helped to show my authority in the corporate space. In addition to that, like really those informational interviews were a way for me to gather like insider intel, right? And that I found to be the most valuable. And that like it is showing that you are an outsider, but also an insider. I know that sounds confusing, but doing your research beforehand to understand what are the main pain points in the field, what could be the pain points that they're experiencing on that team or where they are, and then presenting yourself as a solution focused person who's more of a consultant or a peer rather than like an interview where they're leading it completely. I always, as much as possible, try it to be more like an equal playing field in terms of the conversation, because at the end of the day, they're interviewing me and I'm interviewing there. And what I tell my clients is that think of an interview more like an alignment meeting. You're seeing if there's like a common thread or if there's a connection there and you can help them and they need your help, right? Rather than you are just going in and hoping to answer the questions correctly and then hoping you hear back, because it needs to be equal playing field to show that you are an equal contributor, which is what they want. And they don't know that automatically when you don't have any connection with them. So that was one thing. And then I also, instead of waiting for them to tell me to do a project or to do something, I would just do it automatically. So I used value validation projects. Essentially, I would talk during these informational interviews. I would gather this intel information about the politics, the specifics of the problems that they're solving. And then I would create this project that is related to that. Talk about what their problem is, kind of summarizing, like it shows active listening, and then propose different solutions of what that could look like. And then I shared that with the people that I was either going to interview with or that I already had interviewed with to show that I am actively listening to the conversation and that I'm basically already on the team. Like, do you see what I mean? Like, you have to be strong about it. And that is what really, honestly, what helped me get into most of these big tech companies early on before I had more of an established presence in the industry.
So these value validation projects, I know some career coaches talk about doing these proactively. I'm not a big proponent of it because I find that if it's not asked, it might be a lot of waste of time, but maybe at the right opportunity or at the right stage, it makes sense to invest in this. So when would you proactively invest time in one of these value validation projects, and how much time would you invest in it?
That's a great question. So one thing in general with how I went down this path and how I recommend other folks do is be really smart with your time. Yes, something like this can suck up a lot of time if you let it. But after you build one, templatize it a bit, right? Because you're going for similar roles out there. So let's say you're going for a marketing role. Let's be honest, every company thinks that they're very unique and they're doing things that are very different. But at the end of the day, their marketing or whatever industry, they are dealing with similar things. So create a template for what this looks like and adjust it as needed. It would take me a few hours. So that initial one that I did, but then after that, it would take me maybe about 30 minutes or so to create that. It wasn't as big of a time commitment as it needed to be, or as some people might feel it be. That being said, you need to be mindful of your time. You can get sucked down the rabbit hole. And so you need to be very conscious of how you're spending your time and also just in general, the actions you take during the job search process.
What stage would you normally put one of these together? Because the typical interview process, and tell me if you've seen things differently, is the recruiter screen, unless you get passed by that. Then usually the hiring manager, which is like about a 45-minute conversation. Then if you pass that, then generally the loops, where you'll meet with about 4 people, usually. And then sometimes some companies have an actual presentation that you do. And sometimes for technical roles, there's a technical bar ahead of time. But at what stage would you typically proactively even invest? 30 minutes isn't that much. but at what stage would you put one of these together? And then how do
Yeah.
you convey it without seeming brown nosing, but of
Mhm.
actually value?
Yeah, there's not a one size fits all. The most effective is after the hiring manager discussion that you have with them. And occasionally, too, after you have the conversations with the other individuals that you're speaking with. That being said, I don't suggest that you send that out after every single interview that you have. But at the end, after you do that big presentation, then you can send like a thank you or a follow up to everyone who was there for the project or they're through the interview. And right before they're about to decide, then said, oh, here are some common themes that I heard during the interview process. I just wanted to share my thoughts. Yeah, I just wanted to share my thoughts around this. And I hope this is helpful. Still keeping it fairly casual, right? But you want to show that you're proactive and that you have the type of mindset and even leadership, even if it's an IC role, to be able to work on their team and be able to go with the flow and have the same mindset that they're looking for.
Interesting. I've put together several projects as part of my interviews over time, and we've sometimes assigned candidates to do so. I don't recall any candidates that I've ever interviewed or hired proactively do this. I could imagine it benefiting you. I'm just wondering, and it sounds like it's worked well for you.
100%. So it's interesting you say this because when I was actively looking for roles in this was in like 2018 or so, I was interviewing with a bunch of different companies and I did, I guess you could say, like a informal A/B test where I did this for some roles and then I didn't for others. And I did see like an uptick, a bigger uptick of interest and the amount of offers that came in for those. And actually, the ones that I didn't do, I only got maybe one offer at the end. But from doing these projects, I got, I think, 3 offers at that level. Now, I want to say too, though, that the job market has changed quite a bit. And while that was a good amount that you might be getting in 2018, things have changed a bit. So it doesn't quite work like that, in my opinion. So you might not get quite as many, but from the folks that I work with, anecdotally, they move through the process and land a role about 70% of the time, roughly. I don't have the exact statistics there, but it's pretty high conversion rate if we use marketing terms there.
Yeah, and regardless of whether you present something or not, I think doing that research and coming to the interview with like thoughtful strategies and perspective on the role, and some of that can help be formulated through the informational interviews that you were mentioning. And informational interviews are such a valuable tool
Yeah.
that we advise our clients to do 5 of them per week. And even if they're not interviewing at the company, dig the well before you're thirsty and build those relationships. It sounds like you're quite adept at these informational interviews. How do you
Mhm.
approach an informational interview? Like, how would you even define an informational interview? How do you approach it, and how do you make sure it's effective for you?
2 things. I go in the conversation with a clear purpose, but I always go in with curiosity. That's the driver of everything that I am going through, right? I'm just very curious about the person that I'm speaking with and curious about their career journey. And even personally, too, I want to learn about them and also their experience at the company. I always do research, just as you were mentioning, beforehand on the individual and the company. So, as much as possible, I will be asking, or at least making a statement like, I see the company is doing XYZ, and then a question after that to show that I've done my research. So, overall, it's a bit of a relatively informal conversation, but those key markers that I'm embedding, like linguistically, you could say, in the conversation,
Mm-hmm.
that's how I approach it. But at the high level and how I explain it to the person that I'm interviewing with, I just want to get to know you and understand the trajectory of your career before even whatever the company this is, and then how it's adjusted and changed within your current environment. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's pretty aligned with our philosophy. We generally say to go into the informational interview with the goal of learning, learn about
Yeah.
the person, learn about their industry, learn about how they got there, learn about what resources you should be looking at. And if everything goes well, earn a referral or ideally earn advocacy, which will
Yes.
really set you apart.
I say the same thing, 100%, especially with advocacy, right? Because you want to build these relationships, not just to be one off conversations. You want to be top of mind for people when they're either hiring for a role or maybe they don't have a role open yet. But putting the carrots out there, it's sowing the seeds, right? And it won't work with everyone. But once you start bringing value to the individuals that you're talking with, and value can look a bunch of different ways, people want to hire people they know. I think it's human. It's also like how our brains are set up, right? People that we connect with, and if someone introduces you to someone new, you're more apt to want to work with them. Honestly, not to get off track, but if we go back to the caveman days and all of that, it's the same type of deal. If a random person comes into your clan, you're going to be defensive. But if your friend brings you in, oh, okay, the same idea. And when you meet people for the first time, there isn't trust there necessarily, or if there is, it can be improved, it can be increased. So that's another kind of purpose of that informational interview, where it's subtle competency markers, as I call it, and warmth markers to signal that you are approachable and you are a strongly competent and knowledgeable person in your exact domain. But if you're moving into something new, even just like your critical thinking, that is a huge competence that you can easily show when you do research and you know how to share that research within those informational interviews.
Yeah. And looking at your background, it's very familiar to me. So there's a lot of parallels between our background. In my background, I worked at Google. I was head of scaled operations, and then I moved to become a VP of a startup, Andela. And then very quickly thereafter, I went back to big tech and became director at Facebook. And similarly to you, you were head of learning at Meta. Then you became VP at Calibrate. Then you went back to head of role at DoorDash. So I'd love to hear your perspective, like your moves there and how you think about the title, because some people get hung up on the title, and head of is usually like the equivalent of a level 7 in tech, and director is level 8 and VP is level 10, something like that. But in big tech, but talk about like your whole process from head of a role at Meta to VP role at Calibrate to head of role at DoorDash, and what led to those decisions.
So I have a lot to say. To keep it concise, first, I just want to express, before going into the details of those moves and the thought process there, I would say, especially moving into tech, like Google is one example, there's prestige with that name. There's prestige with becoming head of, director, VP, all of that, right? Initially, when I moved into those leadership roles, it was the prestige. I didn't realize it at the time, and I wouldn't have worded it like that back then. But I realized after I moved into that role that like, that's not, the title is just a few words, right? It's about, am I doing work that I feel is valuable to both the organization, the people I'm working with, and myself, right? So overall, that has been my big motivator and direction with what I do. It's very purpose driven. And with that in mind, being head of at Facebook at the time, and then VP, and then back to head, there's different levels there. But I guess I recommend to folks, and my philosophy and thoughts on this is, don't worry so much about that exact level, because it's not everything in life is like a ladder usually, right? So some things maybe, but our lives go up and down, right? It's just how the world works. So that's the first thing I just wanted to say. Second thing, with every role that I move into in company, I really focus on what the goal of the role is. And yes, like what success looks like in this role, but like, how am I pushing the needle in terms of whatever the company mission is that aligns with my mission too. I'll give you an example. When I interviewed for Meta or Facebook, and why I decided to join them, it's because the mission of the company at the time, it's since changed, but a focus on connecting people throughout the world, right? I really identified with that. The role was focused on business education. So it was bringing marketing education to the world, right? I focus on ad agencies. I really identified with that, right? But there became a point where I realized, okay, I have done my due diligence here, and like, I just knew internally that it was time for something new. So I start talking to people and understanding more, as I was saying before, about informational interviews. And I wasn't so targeted when I was moving. I wasn't in need of landing a job immediately. This was before I needed to. Or yeah, so I just started meeting people and understanding their companies, their roles, their teams, all of that. And then from there, I that's when I started. Okay, I really like DoorDash, right? Or I really like Calibrate. Let me focus in on those companies, right? And see the impact that I could potentially have there and the impact that the company is doing. So that's really how my career has led. And I would say too, like for me and similar to you, Alan, we have moved up like the ladder, right? But I don't recommend that for people necessarily, right? Some people gravitate towards that, but other people don't, and that's fine. For me, I tend to thrive in leadership positions where I'm leading from behind. I'm empowering the team. I'm not a figurehead, right? But like an empowerer, right? That's where I naturally go. That's what brings me joy and brings energy to the company. So that's a position that I'm looking for. And that's essentially, right, how I moved company to company.
Awesome. So at DoorDash, you were there for a couple of years and you started Career Alchemy. It looks like simultaneously as a side hustle
Yeah.
originally. Talk about what led you to create Career Alchemy and how you managed that as a side hustle while you were at DoorDash,
Yeah.
and what led you to have a clean break with the corporate path and go all in on your entrepreneurial endeavor.
Yeah, for sure. So, ever since I moved into big tech, I've had people that I've either worked with in education, right, before that career transition, or even just other people who've always come to me seeking for my thoughts and advice on their career and what they're doing, like informally. And I started realizing, like, I not only loved having those conversations with people, but I started having skin in the game for these people, right? Like, it wasn't just those individual conversations. I would check in on them like every week or every month. Hey, how are things going? Just want to say hi and check in. And that is something that really just brought me joy. When I started doing that early on informally, and I had been hearing, especially after the pandemic started, oh, you should think about actually getting paid for this and having clients and what have you. I'm like, oh, I'm fine. Then I started in 2021 and then moving into 2022. It did dawn on me, I love this. I love what I'm doing here, and it doesn't feel like work for me. Like, why don't I just dabble in this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Take on a few clients at a time and, see how that goes. Like, I don't need to completely do a career change at that point. I just wanted to see and explore. That led me to 2023 and then 2024, where I was doing this on the side as a side hustle. And then in 2024, I just felt internally that the joy that I had when I was working at this last company, it was going in, my joy was going in other directions, right? So I decided to take a risk and go out on my own. It's been something that I've always wanted to do for the past 15, 16 years. I always felt I was always scared and nervous. Yeah, I just realized that I need to push past that. And we only live life once, Alan. And I don't want to be, it's going to sound morbid, but I don't want to be on my deathbed regretting these things like
Yeah.
I didn't do, but I could have. Like, maybe I think things have been going really well, right? And I think it's going to continue working, but like, whatever this brings me to, this is my path, right? I need to own that and not be afraid. So I took the leap of faith essentially to go full time in my business.
Cool.
Yeah.
And what are some of the best things about going all in on your business? And what
Mhm.
are some of the challenges that you have compared to the corporate life?
It, for sure. So I'll share mine. And then, Alan, I'm really curious about yours too.
Yeah.
So, to start with, one of the biggest challenges that I did not expect at all was personal growth and personal development. Right. When you're a solopreneur, it can be lonely, especially if you don't have a business coach initially or a career coach, right? You don't have direction. You need to figure things out. So I realized, similar as what I did in my transition in 2025 to 2026, is I go internally first. Why do I have fear around this? Why am I procrastinating on this? All of this. I would use something, the 5 why technique. A lot of people might be aware of this, but if not, essentially it is in a feeling. This is how I used it.
Yeah.
Identifying a feeling that I had that was a blocker, and then asking myself, why am I feeling that way? Answering that question and then doing that 4 more times. And then it really takes out this emotional piece and these kind of initial blockers and just brings a different perspective. So after I started getting clear on that, I realized too that I can't do this alone, meaning, yes, I'm still a solopreneur, but I hired a coach, right? Just like people are coming to me for career coaching,
Yeah.
I'm doing the same. I need guidance there too. That the personal development has been the biggest unexpected challenge, but also gift, I guess you could say, from this experience. I'm curious, Alan, what we have similar backgrounds, as you said, moving from corporate into our own businesses. What has it been like for you?
So the loneliness that you mentioned, I'm a very collaborative person. So even
Mm,
since I started Kadima, I've always worked with other coaches and partners,
mhm.
like not only to be coached myself, but also as part of Kadima, bringing them in. So I
Yeah.
do collaborating and getting other ideas. So I don't think I've had that loneliness per se, but some of the challenges that I've had is cash flow. It's a
Mm,
lot easier to get a steady paycheck from a corporation every 2 weeks and have your 401k and all those benefits.
mm,
I think also the ups and downs of you have
mm,
1 month or 2 months that are really good and you're like, oh, I'm finally through the woods. And
mhm,
then August hits and no one wants to get a new job in August. And I think also just testing and learning so much. I think
mhm.
also not having the same resources that I'm used to working at some of these organizations that have all these reporting and analytics, and I'm doing everything on my own. So
Yeah.
it's a lot of that. And also, but on the positive side, all the stupid stuff that I saw companies doing before, we're
Mhm,
not doing that.
mhm.
So I do stupid stuff, but I take it like I take guidance from my team. We have a psychologically safe environment so that people can express their concerns. We're doing things what I believe to be the right way of building and growing a business and the way
Yeah.
that I I was always challenged with companies that would talk about values. Like the latest value du jour was DEI, and all these
Mm,
companies talking a big ass game about DEI, and then seeing on the in reality how it's all performative bullshit, and
mhm.
that stuff would piss me off. But now, if I say we're going to do something, we either do it or I'm the one who's accountable for not doing it.
Yeah.
It gives me like a lot more control,
Mm,
but also I was sick this week, and if I was sick while I was at Salesforce, I would have taken a couple of sick days. I had unlimited sick time.
yeah.
Here, if I take a sick day, the business, I have a team and the team is great, but there's still a lot of shit that I still need to do a webinar, so I
Yeah.
couldn't reschedule my webinar because I was sick.
Yeah. I feel very similar to what you're saying. And definitely earlier we're talking about like the comforts of a full-time role, like the benefits, the 401k, all of that. That's what made it very
Yeah.
difficult.
And you worked for well paying companies too, and that
Yeah.
probably helped you to start your business as well. If it's anything like me, I was able to save up a nice nest egg and put
Yeah.
away like a nice chunk of money that I was able to invest in months, turning into years of challenging cash flow.
Yeah, I definitely we're in yeah, and I would say too that we're I don't know if luck is the word, but that's a position. I'm in a similar boat that we're in that not everyone has. So I think it's great that like we're able to build something that is helping so many people move into their careers and do different things. And even if it's not career related, right? It's people focused. And I think the cash flow thing, money, as you said, comes and goes. And naturally, it will continue and grow with your business. And also, it's helping other people with their cash flows too.
Yeah. No, that's what gives me the most joy. Like we have different coaches in academia, and some coaches get really emotionally excited about someone overcoming a barrier and landing that job. I get excited about getting people more money. Show me the money, show me the dollar, show me the metrics. I'm like a numbers guy. But
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is, it's like people are happy to get that job and overcome those limiting beliefs. And yeah, break
Yeah.
through. Like you went from teaching to tech. I went from psychology to baseball to finance to tech. So
Yeah.
it can be done. And I think a lot of the things that you teach your clients, we teach our clients, academia, building the relationships, leading with curiosity, which I know is a big
Mm.
thing of yours, yields really positive results.
Yeah, thank you. And at the end of the day, it's all about helping people, right?
Yeah.
Helping people to live a better life, career focused. And even beyond that, I would say a lot of times too. Yeah, like it's very much on the same page with you on how we're two different people and everyone is different. But I get joy also from getting people to get high salaries, right?
Yeah.
But it's different, right? In terms of what drives you, what brings you the most joy. And then for me, it's about building relationships with people and empowering people to
Yes.
grow their network and something I call webbing, which is going in companies and really like meeting a whole bunch of people and having a big network there so you have more of an insider presence. I love helping people with that. There's so many different areas in the career space, and it's great to know what brings us joy so much and then what are other ways we can collaborate with other coaches and other people along the way.
And I think the collaboration, the relationship building, you can go fast alone or go further
Yeah.
together or whatever the Nelson Mandela
Yeah.
quote is that I'm butchering here, but it's so true. So we're low on time here, and this has been such a jam-packed episode with great advice. It's really great to hear your story. I have two last questions for you, Keith.
Sure.
First, what is one last piece of sick career advice you want to leave our audience with here today?
Yes. My biggest piece of advice is stay true to yourself, right? And don't try to just fit yourself into a corporate box and what it shows on a job description. You need to show your competence in what you're doing and your expertise, but that warmth piece, that approachability is equally as important as the skill sets you have. Make sure that you don't lose that, which can happen in the corporate environment, but you don't want to lose your identity. And I know that from a fact when I was a teacher, as I said earlier, and seeing myself only as a teacher, the authenticity factor
Yeah.
is the most important piece. Yeah.
100% agree. The authenticity, yeah, integrity, very
Yeah.
important. And my last question before we wrap this up, where can people find you, help you, support you, reach out to you? What's the best way to follow you out there?
So my business, as you said earlier, is Career Alchemy. My website, however, is keithandco, and I offer complimentary consultations. As I said, I think it's all about building that authentic connection first to see if it's even a good fit and have alignment where I can help you and there's gel there. So to sign up for a 30-minute consultation, you can go to www.keithand, which is KEITHAND.co, not com, /calendar. Yeah, I really hope that anyone who's listening was energetic and motivated by our discussion, and I would love to hop on a call and learn more about you. So
And you're also a prolific poster on LinkedIn. I think that's where I first saw you.
yeah,
So people
yeah.
can check you
Or
out on LinkedIn.
LinkedIn. Exactly. I post daily, so at 9
Uh,
a.m.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Great, Keith. It was a great conversation. I've really enjoyed getting to know you off of the podcast and looking forward to future partnerships beyond this podcast. And thanks for sharing all your sick career advice with our audience here. Thanks a lot.
Of course. Thank you, Alan. And thank you, everyone, for listening. So grateful that you're here with us, too.
Thanks, Keith.